Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome along to Marvel Snap Zone on this fine Monday afternoon. Hopefully, all is very well with you, much like it is with me, and hopefully, it remains in the world of Marvel Snap. We're back for another episode of the weekly tier list update today, where I walk you through the current best performing decks out there in Marvel Snap if you're looking to ladder up and reach infinite rank as quickly as possible. Bit of an interesting week, this one. From the outside, it kind of doesn't seem like there's that many changes this week in Marvel Snap. But if there's a lot of archetypes that are remaining the same from week to week, regardless of movement, most of them have, in fact, evolved in some way over the last 7 days. Also, if you've checked out Infinite Decks of the Week released recently, you might have noticed that some of the archetypes are being mixed together and being combined into something new altogether, creating a new breed of decks on the Marvel Snap ladder. Those decks are very new for the most part, so we'll be keeping them out of the tier list for now as we don't have enough data or information about them. This innovation is being monitored and could be included very, very soon. Mostly, a lot of our tier 4 decks are starting to see some of their stronger cards included in other builds as secondary win conditions for a deck with enough wiggle room to afford one. So what's on the menu for this week? Week 2 is in the books, and the book is still definitely being written as we speak. The decks included this week are currently the ones dominating the Marvel Snap ladder, but with more players reaching infinite rank every day, more players are enticed to create and try new things, leading to more exotic brews. It will obviously take time for those to kind of make a status, get themselves ranked here on the tier list, but it felt important to acknowledge those decks currently exist and are being shared in our other videos and articles here at Marvel Snap Zone. Before we take a look at the overall tier list this week, as always, just want to take a second to thank the sources we use for the information to create this list each and every week. First of all, Marvel Snap Pro, in collaboration with ourselves and Pro Meta, do in fact have a Marvel Snap tracker. If you haven't tested this thing out so far, it is currently Windows only, work in progress to expand that in the future, but it will help you keep track of your game wins, your cube averages, your deck win rates, all kinds of other fantastic information, alongside stuff like best performing decks in certain locations, and an overall public metagame and global leaderboard. So if those are things that interest you, I highly recommend giving the link in the description box a click. Go download it, let us know how you feel, and hopefully it will be improving your game very, very soon. Data from that tracker now being used to influence this tier list. SnapFan and their community Discord server, as always, helpful with the data as well. SnapDecks over on Twitter, tweeting out all you guys finding success out there in the Snap universe and showcasing the decks you made it to Infinite with, also super helpful. All the players out there coming to us personally and discussing their insight and their time. You also have a massive impact on this one, so thank you for offering your opinions and helping us form some kind of conclusive example of what the ladder looks like in Marvel Snap right now. With all that said and done, let's head on over to the global tier list, take a look at everything together, and then start breaking down tier 3 and above. So as always with this list, there are some budget options and tier 4 options available if you're looking for something a little bit more user-friendly, if you're missing some cards, or maybe something that's a little bit more of a curveball to explore on the Marvel Snap ladder right now. We don't tend to cover these in detail in the video, but you can get exportable deck lists from the article in the description box below, so go feel free to check out some of those and get on the ladder and see how they go for you. Tier 3 this week, however, does have some things kind of trending down and up. Cerebro 2, kind of making its way down at the moment. Not having the best showing all round. It's definitely a fan favourite deck, but the results just aren't really there to back up a high place on the SAP tier list right now. So unfortunately kind of falling from grace. She-Hulk Baero really falling from grace. What was once considered to be the best deck in Marvel Snap, currently having a very bad time at the hands of Armor being the default 2-drop for so many different decks. So pretty telling this one is on the way down. On the way up, however, we have Zabu Control finding itself continuing to be refined by a number of players looking for a more reactive way to abuse the new Season Pass card, so we'll be taking a look at a version of that in just a moment. Zerocula finds itself at tier 3 this week, kind of the preferred way still to build Kazoo, the early game aggressive aggro archetype. That might very well be evolving very soon with Dazzler entering the fray this week, so hopefully we'll see if that deck changes significantly in the future. Most importantly, Galactus is making its way down to tier 3 this week, a deck that was kind of highlighted and very popular during the Altar of Death featured location. The game plans are becoming a bit more noticeable even for the more obscure lists trying to hide their game plan. As a result, more cubes tend to be getting lost than gained in big win games for Galactus, so trending downwards. Hopefully not a long-term thing for this deck. Moving into tier 2, the Electro Ramp deck is a similar story, honestly. It is still having a better performance all round because overall stats seem to be a better finish than Galactus right now, but the play pattern's still not having the best of results right now, meaning it's finding itself on the bottom of tier 2 this week. Tier 2, however, the Handsize deck making a tick up in this time round. Still kind of a good card strategy at its core, but slightly different than the lists that are caring about priority, hence why it will get its own ranking and discussion this week. So nice to see it making an appearance in Tier 2. Speaking of Tier 2, Patriot Surfer and Negative Surfer, the two ways of playing with Silver Surfer that do not include Sera, both finding themselves firmly in this list. I'm a massive fan of the Patriot version of this deck. I think it's very, very good, even if it's becoming more and more understood and explored at this moment in time. So good to see it continuing to climb, while Negative Surfer holds a very stern spot and continues to be a reasonable choice if you are looking to climb. The Good Cards Priority deck unfortunately falling a place this week, down to the top of Tier 2, no longer what we would consider to be a Tier 1 choice, and we'll look into exactly why that is very shortly. This week, however, Tier 1 shooken up just a little bit. Seracle Surfer no longer the de facto best deck in the game in our opinion. That title now belongs to Shuri Zero, an archetype that is already a Tier 1 choice heading into this week, but has continued to refine itself and put up an astounding performance this week, making it the current kingpin of Marvel Snap. More importantly, a new addition in this tier this week, Zabu Darkhawk making its way up as the confirmed, for now, best way to play with Zabu. The deck putting up a great showing as more people get their hands on the cards required to play it, and we look forward to seeing whether it can hold this Tier 1 place in the weeks moving forward. As always, if you're looking for a more detailed explanation about what each tier actually means and what kind of is involved in decks that are placed in those spots, you can see this on screen for you now, but there is a dedicated breakdown as to what this means over in the article as well, so feel free to go and check that one out. So starting off with Tier 1 in this breakdown, let's look at Shuri Zero and what it's all about right now. For the last several weeks, Shuri Zero has taken a top spot in the metagame as it started to adapt against Silver Surfer. Particularly, the huge popularity of armor has been a passive positive for this deck, because you could normally be countered by Shang-Chi. With armor in most decks in the metagame right now, it isn't uncommon to have two locations where Shang-Chi will not do anything. The perfect opportunity to be abused by a card like Shuri. This leads to the deck being able to focus on developing as many points as possible, something this archetype is very, very good at doing. Outside of this very beneficial particularity, Shuri Zero feels like it's almost a bit easier to pilot than some of the other decks towards the top of the rankings. With a very straight pattern on turn 4, 5 and 6, where only one card gets played, Shuri Zero doesn't require the same intricacies of managing the board like a deck like Patriot or Silver Surfer can, for example. If you're looking for more information about how to play this deck, go visit the article below and check out those play patterns for you there. The newly abused Zabu definitely helps us abuse our 4-cost cards in this list. 1 plus Shuri doubles the amount of points of our combo overall and makes a card like Typhoid Mary a worthy inclusion. It doesn't change much how the deck is played, however. As a result, the deck's game plan is quite easy to figure out based on your hand. The big emphasis should be maximizing your chances at realizing your win condition, planning ahead of how your opponent might be able to interact with you. If you are looking for potential additions, again, these are featured in the article at this moment in time. So if you're missing cards from this deck and want to see what you can and cannot replace, go check it out. Den has detailed all the options for you below each and every deck in the article this week. Seracle Surfer remains the best deck of the past season and early January, but it's starting to be challenged by other archetypes, making its way down just a smidge this week. In addition to Shuri Zero being able to win a point shootout with you, Leech can just shut down this infamous last turn. Zabu Darkhawk is also presenting a nice challenge for this one through shuffling rocks into the deck or competing with a huge Darkhawk. Seracle Surfer is still among the very top decks in the current metagame, and players who develop some comfort on it should be able to be kind of hard to beat consistently. However, with other archetypes able to slam a ridiculous amounts of points on the board, the need to exactly guess what the deck will do on turn 6 is kind of reduced, limiting how scary the deck can feel to play against. Overall, it simply feels like Seracle Surfer will have to share the spotlight for the time being. Zabu Darkhawk, the new addition, arguably the still best performing deck around Zabu. The limitation of Darkhawk being a Series 5 card still makes this one kind of hang in the balance as the build seems to get pricier each and every day. Nevertheless, Zabu Darkhawk is a very difficult deck to contest when the draws align and one can quickly be drawing rocks while looking at a couple of 15 power Darkhawks on the other side of the table. The deck still seems to be evolving right now, and it's looking for more ways to develop points than just a big Darkhawk. Shuri noticeably has joined this archetype and helps to transform Rockslide into a lane winner by itself rather than just a nice utility card. Spider-Man and Absorbing Man are still among the more popular inclusions in this version, but other 4-cost cards like White Queen and Crossbones that are more focused on points over disruption have been spotted as well. Play plans of this one also available in the article if you like, and there are definitely some non-precise play patterns and some more flexible ones overall. There are definitely a chunk of potential additions for this one as well, but I think it's important to note that unfortunately this version of the deck cannot replace Darkhawk. It is needed to play this deck. However, if you are looking for the best Zabu deck to play that doesn't have access to a card like Darkhawk, a version has kind of been catching on in the community like fire recently with a different take on how to generate points through 4-cost cards. There isn't really a go-to build for this one at the moment in that regard, with several players sharing their take on this emerging deck, including ourselves. Typhoid Mary, Red Skull, Sandman, Shang-Chi also seeing play in this type of decks. But for now, we're calling this one Zabu Points, the kind of core based around Dracula Jubilee and things like Ghost Rider alongside Lady Sif. So many ways of building this, but definitely the kind of second most popular take on Zabu right now that is currently emerging in the metagame. Tier 2 this week has the Good Cards priority deck at the very forefront. With other archetypes being refined, the Good Cards deck is moving down a place as it has lost a bit of momentum, but still represents the go-to Series 3 deck to climb the ladder in our opinion. The reason this deck was demoted back to Tier 2 after a week in the higher tier is mostly a limitation on its energy usage. Compared to the 3 decks that are in the lead, it's become quite obvious that the Good Cards archetype is able to kind of do one thing and is known to do things on certain turns, while other archetypes can still be more unpredictable overall in comparison. It's an interesting one, this. I kind of look forward to seeing whether we kind of see a push back on the consistency of this deck in the future, or whether it's kind of here to stay at the top of Tier 2 for now. Negative Surfer might just be the best deck if you like to snap aggressively and take your chances at drawing the right negative cards. Negative Surfer suffers from being a little bit less reliable than the decks that are around it. Also, there is some collateral damage to Zabu bringing back Enchantress in the metagame on this one, because Iron Man being cancelled out often means you lose a lane that you thought was a surefire win. We've discussed kind of before and in other pieces of content about how new archetypes are looking to mix several win conditions that are being explored right now. Mr. Negative is a regular inclusion in those decks where drawing the card is more of a bonus than the bulk of your game plan. Look to see more on this in the next week. Patriot Surfer is maybe the archetype that is undergoing the most changes right now alongside the Zabu decks. Patriot and Silver Surfer are a very good pair. I would say 8 to 9 cards are locked up for this archetype, but Misty Knight, Shocker, Sarah and Debris aren't really staples that you believe. Various lists can be seen around without those cards in this archetype. Also, just like Mr. Negative, this archetype is seeing a lot of experimentation around using its various win conditions in other places, and the amount of support each needs to be worthwhile in those decks. Depending on how comfortable you are with this archetype and you have a vision for it, results may vary, so do take this ranking with a grain of salt. The point-focused counterpart of the Good Cards priority archetype, the Handsize variant, is built around Devil Dinosaur, dropping eventual disrupting tools to focus on development instead. This is very likely the best free-to-play friendly deck available currently. There are only 3 Pool 3 cards required for this one, making it a great budget choice to climb up the metagame. This much cheaper price doesn't seem to hurt the deck all that much, honestly, and this deck is particularly good against its Leech counterpart or decks looking to be disruptive as a whole. Thanks to a Big Devil Dinosaur and the Handsize package of Agent 13, Sentinel, White Queen and Moon Girl, the deck always seems to have a way to use its synergies efficiently. They reliably set up a turn where Aero or Leader can close the door on any opposing comeback. The whole point when playing this deck is to set up the best possible for your win conditions to be successful at winning you a lane. If the utility cards are able to take one the opponent didn't seriously invest into seriously, that makes it even easier later on. Just like the other good cards deck, seizing priority when going into your Aero turn tends to be quite important at having this card be at its best. Electro Ramp, a very quiet deck this week. Electro Ramp still represents the archetype with a basic game plan and is looking to enforce it on most of its opponents. With the current metagame looking to favour flexibility and other synergistic decks, Electro Ramp kind of goes the other way and seems to be happy as long as it finds a way to ramp into an earlier late game all around. I wouldn't be surprised if this deck is really much weaker than the numbers indicate overall, but the archetype being much easier to pilot than other decks on this list kind of has to play a role in this one's success as well. Tier 3 this week, Galactus Electro, among the hottest decks during Altar of Death. Galactus is not a deck that performs well under the spotlight. Most of Galactus' strength kind of comes from surprising an opponent and punishing their early investment, which is now destroyed. But when everyone is talking about this deck, and opponents are on the lookout for how to ruin each of your best setups, the deck suddenly feels a fair bit worse. Null being more popular seems to seal the deal on the card being very strong in the archetype. On the other end of things, Shang-Chi being popular and is guaranteed to hit as there is only one lane can be very hurtful for that card all around. Zerocula is still here in focus, with the destroy mechanic being largely popular during both Altar of Death and the Savage Land featured locations. Being a Kazoo enjoyer wasn't easy this week. In addition to the deck not being so surprising anymore, Killmonger is quite difficult to beat for this archetype when locations are pushing for that card to be popular. The deck still has its merits and has had a quiet week all round, but that isn't too alarming just yet. It could definitely be worrisome in the future though, seeing some of its tools being used alongside Zabu to potentially better effect. Speaking of Zabu, Zabu Control largely on the rise. Like most of the Zabu archetypes, the pure control archetype is not doing so well in comparison to the others. In order to survive, we start seeing more lists including cards to fight in the points department. So far, Dracula seems to be a fan favourite and make a lot of sense, as it lets the opponent have priority, something the deck kinda needs. She-Hulk also gained popularity in this build, offering you some explosive turn 6 plays, and are simply kind of rewarding for passing turn when there wasn't a need to react to the opponent just yet. This mix seems like enough to keep the deck relevant for now, but the lists looking to develop points are doing much better currently for Zabu all around. So keep your eyes on this one. We look forward to seeing if it's able to evolve moving forward. If you prefer a non-Zabu version of this deck, the previous versions, including Sarah, do still make some sense. They just definitely pack less of a high roll in comparison to the current Zabu decks. She-Hulk Baero, armor being a 2-cost staple at the moment for a ton of decks, is slowly having the best of Baero. The deck still feels like a strong one if we're looking to potentially play the strongest play patterns we can, but the current metagame has too many annoying traits for it to really perform. In addition to armor, Leader hasn't lost much popularity since the patch, Shang-Chi is a popular inclusion, and other decks are playing She-Hulk or Death, limiting how Wave can be so impactful like it has been in the past. The whole point of this deck is to be able to destroy effects while having reveal priority, something that is commonly contested by many of the top archetypes in the game right now. Cerebro 2, unfortunately trending a little downward this week. It's still popular enough, it's still posting decent results to be included in this chunk of the tier list, but it's starting to become very difficult to find a reason to run it over Patriot or other of the current win condition options in the current metagame, except because you like it, of course. Kind of similarly to Galactus, Cerebro seems to be a card that is at its best when people forget that it's there and don't recognise what it's doing in the first turns of the game. Once Cerebro is on the list of decks to be careful for, it immediately becomes easier to anticipate what it can do and how many points one can beat on each location. A large part of the visible changes in the metagame are still centered around Zabu. With 3 different archetypes currently represented, the card is doing its best to be Silver Surfer's biggest competition. This week, however, the honour of best card has to go to Shuri. A card that originally started as a good buy is now at the core of several of the strongest late game play patterns in Marvel Snap. Her pairing with Zero already produced some fireworks, and Sauron might be able to help that deck even more once enough players are able to test that card out. Outside of the Battle Pass and Series 5 though, a lot is happening as well. Mr. Negative, Patriot and Wong mostly are starting new careers as secondary win conditions, supporting Silver Surfer and Zabu in the process and helping them unlock new lines of play. For the evergreen archetypes that are Deathwave and Cerebro, it's difficult to picture those rising back before we have another balance patch. Yet if leader is changed and armor isn't an auto-include anymore, we might still see Death and Wave have another run very soon in the near future. This week, we gained Shana into the Series 5 collectible cards, and it's a card that I'm kind of curious about. For the longest time, Kazoo has been a beginner-friendly archetype in the Marvel Snap Encyclopedia, so it could be interesting to see that deck rise in the community of the more advanced players. What shape and form it will take, and whether it is better than Zerocula overall, very much remain to be determined, but I'm excited to find out. Obviously, Killmonger is still roaming, ready to punish decks with too many one-cost cards, as the card is shining even outside of destroy-based decks right now in things like Seracle Surfer, so a lot of interaction is possible in this metagame with the arrival of a card like Shana. We'll of course let you know all about this in the next tier list next week. Until then, feel free to join us in the community Discord server if you want to talk more things Marvel Snap, or come and find us directly over on Twitter at Marvel Snap Zone, then CCG, or HowlingMines. But until next time, I have been HowlingMines. You've been amazing, and this has been your weekly tier list update for Marvel Snap. Take care, have a good one.